to Contesting Wrestling, and
premium episode number 2.
yeah, you are a premium human who, if you're listening to this upon the week it is released, statistically you are still almost definitely one of our moms. But if you are listening to this in the future, after this podcast has blown up a little bit and you're working your way through our archive, hello from 2019.
So we got a couple matches we're talking about this time, and they are complements to our second regular episode. So last premium episode, we said something about it being a compliment to the first 2 episodes, but really last episode was a compliment to the first episode. This one complements the second. So that second episode featured Bret Hart versus Owen Hart from WrestleMania 10, and Roman Reigns versus The Undertaker from WrestleMania 33. So this episode, we're doing a couple of matches that I think we mentioned during that one. The first one is from Survivor Series 1993, which features the Hart family of Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Bruce Hart, and Keith Hart against, I don't know if they actually called them the King's Court. I think they actually called Lawler and the Little Kings the King's Court. But anyway, I like to call this team the Kids Court, which references both that Shawn Michaels replaced Jerry the King Lawler in this match, and that he did so because Lawler was currently on trial for statutory rape.
Oh, my. Ugh.
You know, to be fair to Jerry Lawler, and I usually just bury him, all the charges were dropped pretty promptly. The WWE told him when the charges came on, if the courts clear you, we'll put you back on TV. But as soon as the charges were levied, they were like, go back to Memphis. And if you're convicted, we never want to see you again.
And I perhaps this is unfair, and it is, legally unfair, I guess. But I feel like I still believe those charges against Jerry Lawler, even if they were dropped.
So the team ended up being Shawn Michaels and his inexplicably Knights, because they were supposed to be the King's Knights.
It was literally a week or 2 before the Survivor Series that they had to swap this out.
So it was the Blue Knight, the Red Knight, and the Black Knight, who were actually all played by fairly well-known wrestlers at the time.
Yeah, who were they? Because I felt like I had no idea. I didn't know if I was supposed to know who they were or not.
No, I didn't know when I was a little kid, and there was never like a major plot for it, but one of the Knights was Greg the Hammer Valentine.
That was the Blue Knight.
Yeah, he was a wrestling veteran. He'd been around for 20 years at that point, 30 years maybe. He's still on the scene somehow.
Former Intercontinental Champion and Tag Team Champion. He's in the Hall of Fame, isn't he?
He wasn't a super early inductee, but he was an early inductee.
And a great wrestler in his day.
Yeah.
His match versus Roddy Piper at, I think, Starrcade 84.
The dog collar match.
Yeah, is still talked about very much. So the Red Knight was perennial WWF jobber Barry Horowitz, who eventually kind of had a little run where they were like, oh shit, Barry Horowitz actually won a match. And that might be something we cover eventually on this podcast.
It's an interesting story. It's hard to really get the oomph of that story together without having spent years watching Barry Horowitz come on TV every week and lose.
I do want to, at some point in this podcast, do a jobber episode because I am absolutely fascinated by this concept and just would love to get into the head of. So that just seems like a really interesting role to play in the greater wrestling context, is to go out there and professionally make somebody else look good.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's a job that in wrestling is very respected. If you're good at it, you could have a job for a long time. The guys they have doing it on the new NWA Power Show are like Sal Rinauro and guys like that were always solid, but just never became stars. And Ben, you and me know who some of these guys are, even if the mass audience doesn't, because why would they? They were never stars.
Yeah, and so speaking of that, the third Knight, the Black Knight, is a guy who was big in the territories and the indies before the indies were really a big deal, but never really made it to the WWF besides this one instance, as far as I know, named Jeff Gaylord.
Yeah, I don't know much about Jeff Gaylord. I could tell you more about Barry Horowitz and Greg Valentine. One of the very first indie shows that I was at outside of just Gleason's gym working for Johnny Rods, Greg Valentine was there signing autographs, and man, he looked very sad. Just as just as a human being that he had to get up and go to some indie show to sign autographs. He looked like if instead of getting killed, Jabba the Hutt just lost all his power and had to work an office job, and 10 years in looks at himself in the mirror like, man, you used to be somebody, and now you're just selling autographs to these kids. They don't even really know who you are. Man,
It's really a shame they wouldn't let Ryan Johnson make that too. He fought so hard for that to be episode 8.
So the other
it's
match.
not too late. It's not too late. The way they're just going to crank. Well, they've stopped already cranking.
They learned.
Yeah.
Man, I couldn't make it through Solo.
I haven't even bothered trying.
I people to people. Some people are like, oh, I don't know, it's good. I made it 20 minutes in, and I was like, I'm bored, and this movie is asking me to transfer all of my love for Harrison Ford onto this fucking guy. It was really as if it's like, oh, like my parents just divorced, and then the guy comes in and he's just like, don't call me Gary ever. I'm just dad. Call me dad right away. I've been dating your mom 2 weeks. Call me dad. That's what it felt like. What's
Jeez,
his
that's
guy's
harsh.
name? Erlin something. What's his name?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
It's
So,
not his fault.
I don't mean that dismissively. I mean he doesn't matter.
No, and I
Yeah.
it wasn't his fault. It was
To
it's,
the universe.
it's Disney's fault.
So the other match we're going to be watching is Daniel Bryan versus Roman Reigns from Fastlane 2015. And we're doing this match because, we sort of already talked about Roman Reigns at one of his worst moments in his match against The Undertaker. And just to be fair, I thought we'd pull out what I consider to be, to date, his best singles match.
What? Wait, what? That's what this is?
Yes, that's what this is.
My favorite Roman Reigns is right at the beginning when he's in the middle of the Shield and the other two guys did all the heavy lifting and he just came in and powerbombed people and made that bellow and then left.
This
Sure.
is trash.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
Daniel Bryan tried as hard as he goddamn could.
It is, and having never, I've never seen a Daniel Bryan match. My experience of Daniel Bryan has been people telling me that I look like him.
It's because you have a beard and no other reason.
I feel like there's actually maybe some cheekbone similarity.
Maybe some
I could just
cheekbone.
just a
That's
bit.
it.
I feel like it's not crazy. And I feel like watching this match, I was like, boy, I bet I would enjoy matches that Daniel Bryan does with people who are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably my favorite wrestler of all time. It's kind of close between him and Bret Hart. But I just think that everything he does, every movement he makes is interesting and impactful and intense. And he just draws you into a match like almost no one else.
And it really was a contrast between him and a guy who, if you said the opposite of all the things you just said, that would be true.
So what should we do first?
Let's do the Shawn Harts match.
Okay. So a little more context. There is some story for Shawn Michaels coming into this match. So he had been the Intercontinental Champion for quite a while at this point. And I'm not sure exactly why he had to leave TV for real, but
he was suspended on they say he failed a drug test.
oh,
He contests that he failed a drug test. Well, no, he doesn't contest that he failed it. He contests the test because they said that he was on steroids. And he's like, I'm not on steroids. Of all the guys that have been on steroids, he had gained weight, but he had gained weight because he had been chilling with guys who were drinking a lot, so he was drinking a lot. He was like kind of chub Shawn Michaels, at that point. And he was like, oh, on steroids? Are you crazy?
Well, I'm sure he is, he obviously is capable of amazing athletic feats. He looks like just sort of relatively normal in shit. If I was hanging out with him and we had our shirts off, like happens in a lot of my fantasies about Shawn Michaels, I would not feel that intimidated by. I would just be like, "Oh, you're like an in shape guy."
You work out, kid. He
Yeah.
does. He has a good looking bicep, and he's doesn't have a lot of.
I was at this stage. It does seem like his mullet was at least level 37.
Oh yeah.
So that must have required a lot of care and maintenance, and
that's where the steroids were going.
Yeah,
was
his
into the
hair.
mullet.
yeah. Well, because
He was
how else
rinsing
can
it
you
in.
sustain that?
So, in the storyline, they basically just said that he had kind of just gone AWOL as the champion, so he hadn't defended the title. So they stripped him of the title, and they had a little sort of mini tournament with a battle royal, and then the last two guys fought. And anyway, Razor Ramon ended up with the Intercontinental title. But you see Shawn Michaels in his promo before this match still with his belt. claiming that he is still the real Intercontinental Champion. And that would be resolved months later at WrestleMania 10, where that Bret Hart-Owen Hart match that we covered was in the first really high-profile ladder match, which we should probably also cover at some point in the future.
It's a historical match. Some people say it hasn't aged that well. Not that it's bad now, but what was at the time considered like possibly the greatest match anyone had ever seen has now just been topped a bunch of times.
Arguably.
Yes. Arguably for hours and days.
When Sean comes out, I feel like the costume he's rocking at this period in time is sort of like if General Zod had to become a stripper in the Phantom Zone to make ends meet. And his energy in the interviews or in the promos is kind of like a sexy Dave Coulier.
He's got news for you.
And also there's just a strong facial resemblance between him and Dave Coulier that I did not notice until the mullet.
And both of them, and actually my older brother, it's weird for me when I look back at that.
Your brother does look like Dave Coulier. Yeah, not as much of the sexy Dave Coulier energy.
No,
that's
Shawn
just
Michaels has a
oozing
lot
out
that.
of.
Well, you haven't seen him when he was younger.
That is true.
Gabe.
That is true.
So also these promos. So we get the Hart team in the back with their dad Stu, who is their corner man, who's like 90 at that point.
Yeah, looking at Stu, he had only been dead for a few years at this point, so he was still looking pretty good.
Well, he had all of the energy that he absorbed from young men in his basement because he was a demented, violent maniac.
And Bret, Owen, and Keith all look pretty comfortable in the promo. But Bruce is standing in the back. He looks really, really nervous. He's wearing sunglasses, which I'm almost sure is something that Bret suggested, because Bret has gone on record saying that the only way he was able to get through cutting promos when he was a rookie and was really nervous about it was to hide behind his sunglasses.
The sunglasses eventually became a signature for Bret. He got his own line of those cool like pink and purple, whatever, like singular, metallic. You'd give one to a kid in the audience.
Damn, I wanted to be that kid as a kid.
I did learn which Hart was my favorite Hart in this match, because there's Bret Hart and Owen Hart, the legendary wrestlers. There's the other Harts who are the less legendary wrestlers, I guess, but still wrestlers, and then working class hero Keith Hart, with his just like a very standard mustache and a no-nonsense haircut, taking time off from, putting out fires in the greater Calgary area to come defend his family's honor. Like, I did not care about anybody else in the Hart family but Keith.
And, Bruce and Keith are both competent wrestlers. None of them does anything spectacular or memorable, really, which I think was by design because Bret and Owen were supposed to be the stars.
And I think that's one of the problems with this match is that so many of the participants were designed not to do anything notable.
Well, that kind of gets to the core of the issue I sort of had with this match.
All right, before you get to that, I just want to say that I think the contrast between Bruce and Keith is really vivid for me, where Keith, as you said, is this working class hero. He just seems like a really humble guy who just wants to do his job, and he's a fine wrestler. He does everything really well. Bruce seems like he really thinks he should have a bigger role in this whole thing, and that he's really worried about looking really good. And I don't know. I don't like Bruce very much.
Neither did Bobby Heenan, who was at his best at this match, just insulting the Harts at every turn. Or as he put it, like, Bruce, isn't that a stupid name? You get 9 months and you come up with Bruce.
And then there's supposed to be 20 other Harts in the audience.
Right.
They show a couple of them in the crowd, and it's just like...
Sean antagonizes a few of them.
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that someone else who did not like Bruce Hart is Stu Hart. And that's why Bruce is like this now.
Probably.
Here's the problem that I have with this match. The parts of it that were cool, like there were a lot of individual moments that I found thrilling. We are eventually, we're gonna have to at some point. I'll go back and rewatch this Bret Owen match that was our second episode, because I feel like maybe now that I understand a little bit more about wrestling, I could get more out of it, because I really enjoyed Owen Hart in this match. I really the bit where he like flung a guy like 5 times in a row as if you were playing a fighting game against a friend who knows the one throw and keeps cheesing it, but then he wins. So like, can you really criticize it?
What throw was that?
The throw that Owen did, I'm not entirely sure.
Belly to belly suplex, maybe.
That sounds like one of his throws.
Do you-
I don't remember it off the top of my head. I don't doubt that it happened. Owen could do hip tosses and arm drags with the best of them.
Well, yeah, there's a bit in the middle where it really is. It's like almost like balletic interlude where Owen like 3 or 4 times in a row sort of like does this sort of jumping flinging of the other
Owen
guy.
Hart-
Sounds
Owen
like
Hart-
arm drags, maybe.
Yeah, Owen Hart trained and wrestled in Mexico for a while. He knows how to do lucha libre, and that's where a lot of those moves come from. And if you ever watch lucha, a lot of it is just an extended series of those that fluidly go into each other. So Owen really uniquely amongst his brothers could do that and could just chain them together.
There was a lot of individual stuff that was cool, but this match just felt really long. It felt like there was a lot of filler. When I realized that the way that this match works is that everybody has to get disqualified, eliminated individually, and just realizing like, oh my god, like it's gonna be 8 fucking guys in this. Or not, I don't even remember
That's the
how.
gimmick of the Survivor Series.
And only 3 of them are supposed to be interesting at all.
I don't know. I wound up feeling very meh about this because it had peaks that were good, but it just did not justify all of the filler and all of the boring stuff. And also just that there wasn't as much. When you have other guys in there who are maybe technically competent wrestlers, but don't have any sort of hook, there's no visually interesting flair, there's nothing about their performance that's particularly noteworthy, then it really doesn't matter when the fucking guys who do have a lot of those skills get in there, because you're tired. You're already tired from watching a bunch of boring shit. You know what I mean? Like watching a Knight and like Bruce do whatever holds or punch each other, and it's just not very thrilling. And then your brain maybe perks up a little bit when Owen and Sean get in there or something. But by that point, I don't know. I feel like you accrue too much boredom throughout the course of some of these matches.
Something else that was pretty bad and boring here was Ray Combs, the Family Feud host, who was the MC for the match, told a bunch of like not particularly funny jokes that definitely didn't get over with the crowd, was really bad on commentary, also didn't know how the Survivor Series elimination thing was supposed to work. Ray Combs was a big wrestling fan. He was involved in a couple of events, including WrestleMania 8, and then unfortunately committed suicide.
So I think that the psychology of like a lot of stuff in the ring happening that isn't particularly interesting would have worked a lot better if it was actually Jerry Lawler instead of Shawn Michaels, because they had been building the Lawler-Brett feud for months at this point. And then they could have told the story of, well, Brett's trying to get in there with Lawler, but Lawler keeps getting his nights in. Instead, it was Shawn Michaels, who was a much better wrestler than Jerry Lawler, much better wrestler than just about anybody. But at this point, really, the crowd knew there wasn't that much of a reason to get excited emotionally for any of the Harts to beat up Shawn Michaels. Other than that, it would be an athletic spectacle.
Much more interesting than anything that happened during the match really was the aftermath, of course, which was the whole purpose of the match, which was to create this enmity between Owen and Brett, because of course it's a clean sweep of the Harts beating Michaels and all the Knights, with the exception of Owen getting pinned because he accidentally runs into Brett on the apron, sending Brett into the guardrail. And then while Owen is distracted looking at the aftermath of that, he gets rolled up for the 1-2-3 to Owen's chagrin.
And then after he gets pinned, his brothers are tending to Brett instead of trying to see what's up with Owen. And Owen gets angry, starts kicking the ropes. And that's where the seeds of Owen's heel character happens. All of that is done very well.
He does have a true little brother energy.
He really does.
He really is. He is upset about being the last in line.
He has a dozen older siblings.
Oh, I can't imagine what that does to you.
Yeah.
By the way, the crowd seemed to agree with you, Evan, largely. I noticed them chanting boring at one point, and this match is at the Boston Garden, so they're chanting boring in a Boston accent. It's like, boring. It's pretty good.
I also, like, on a fundamental level, the idea, like, so I can get behind the concept that, the Hart family wants to join together against somebody who's besmirched their honor.
Sure.
Because that's sort of the Hart family style, and that's as compelling a reason for two people to get into, or two or more people to get into the ring and wrestle. But to have it be like, oh, the Hart family joining together to defend their honor, and then Shawn and some guys
Yeah.
with no context, no connection.
Shawn
Shawn-
Michaels and his knights for some reason.
Did he knight them? Does Shawn Michaels have some sort of royalty like that we are unaware of?
Maybe he picked them up in the Excalibur Casino in Vegas or something.
I mean, I guess they just got the costumes and hired the guys. And decided, we'll just swap him out. No one will know the difference.
But
Nobody's watching these guys anyway.
It feels like, once again, it feels like a wasted opportunity of, like, why not have, like, Shawn Michaels and his cousins and have, like, 4 guys dressed up like whack Shawn Michaels come out and, like, they're, you know what I mean? Like,
That would have been great.
or, and I understand that this is sort of a, like, backseat writing kind of thing, but it just seems like there's a lot of stuff you could have done that's not this. That's not just like, oh, what if we just had nothing?
Yeah, they had very little time to put it together, which now that you think about it, though, they put together how many fucking hours of television every week, and they're mostly terrible. So
Well,
they're really
today-
not that good on the fly.
Today is very different from 1993.
Yeah, but-
They had a more limited roster at the time, and everything had to fit together.
Then have it be Brett and Owen and, like, maybe one other, you know what I mean? Like, and, like, Shawn and then somebody else who's meaningful. It just seemed engineered to not be that engaging.
Yeah, now that I think about it, some of the best moments in wrestling are when they have to call an audible because someone gets hurt and they end up coming up with something better. For instance, this year when Mustafa Ali got hurt, so they interjected Kofi Kingston into the Elimination Chamber match, and it got so over with the fans that they ended up having Kofi Kingston win the damn title at WrestleMania.
Yeah, he held the title for several months. It was considered a big success, raised Kofi's profile significantly.
And then they had Brock Lesnar beat him in 5 seconds.
When you're determining the pacing of a match, like, what is the booker and the wrestler, like, I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to ask here. Before you start a match, do you know how long you're shooting for?
Yeah, usually, even if the booker is very hands-off, it'll be like 20 minutes, guys, and then that's how long you have to fill. Oftentimes, it'll be time, what they want the finish to be. If there's a complicated angle, they'll tell you, like, what they're aiming for or what you want the crowd to end the match thinking or feeling. If you want to get really into it with the booker, they might tell you several moves they want you to do, but usually the bare bones is a finish, a time limit, and what you want to get across, and that can just be it.
They might tell you as part of what to get across, right? Like, how fast, I want you guys to go out there swinging right away because we got to get
Right.
the crowd pumped up.
Jump start, guys.
Or they might be like, we're going to have a bunch of matches like that on the card, so we want this one to be slower paced and more technical, right?
Yeah.
Does it happen where the booker might say, like, look, we gotta fill some time tonight, so I need you guys to stretch it out.
Very much so. Like, you guys get an extra 5 minutes, or an extra 10 minutes. Go. More likely, it's you need to cut some stuff out because guys will just stay in there for too long.
And if the last guys went long,
Yeah.
right, then it's going to cut into your time.
So far, I'm trying to find the difference between the matches that I like and the matches that I don't like,
Yeah.
so I can, more effectively try to find, the things that I can connect to in wrestling. And I mean, it really does. Pacing does seem to be more than 50% of what makes a match. Like, you can have wrestlers of varying levels of ability and charisma and something like that, and it seems like you could still, as long as it's paced well and has a couple of interesting things, and
I think it's like comedy, right? Like, timing is everything.
yeah, it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to have the timing of everything you do. Right, there's a rhythm to a wrestling match, and every match has its own rhythm. And it's all about the audience reacting. And if your rhythm is true, the audience will react the way you want them to.
And so I'm sure that part of this is I don't know, honestly, I have less of an attention span the older I get. I feel like when I was a kid, I used to be able to just like devour a 7-book fantasy series like it was nothing, and now I like struggle to pay attention to cooking shows. And that's, I'm sure, just the ravages of age and then the toll that society takes on your ability to pay attention to things. But like, there's a lot of boring wrestling. We've watched a lot of boring matches. And do you understand the criticism I'm making of this match?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, it's not a great match by any means.
No, it's okay. It gets you from point A to point B in the story, but it's not an all-time classic by any stretch of the imagination.
So because it seems obvious why this match is boring. The inherent kind of lack of conflict in the storyline, the fact that there's just too many people and you have to eliminate them one by one. So how does that happen? Like, what is the series of decisions that leads to this?
So this show is the Survivor Series. Traditionally, these are the types of matches you have on the Survivor Series. You have Survivor Series elimination matches. It was a way, I think, originally when WWF had a really big roster with a lot of stars to get everybody on the show, is that you'd have these big Survivor Series elimination matches. So that's the nature of the show to begin with, and then they have to come up with compelling Survivor Series matches. In the years following this match, they started, and even I think the year before this, some years they didn't do as many Survivor Series elimination matches because they didn't think that they would be that interesting. So, I think it's hard. Again, they're putting out content constantly.
Well, this year in particular, their roster was a little thin. The Survivor Series card was 4-on-4 Survivor Series matches and a tag team match from a more local promotion that they had been working with, which is another reason why they couldn't just substitute in more guys that were relevant. All of their guys that were relevant were already booked in matches that they were promoting.
They had to fill 3 hours of a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
I understand that they have a lot of content that they have to put out, but like that doesn't justify putting out bad content. You know what I mean? Like if your struggle is, oh my God, we have to put this much stuff out, that's why a percentage of it is not good. Like, I don't know, that doesn't fucking fly for me.
If they cut it to 2 hours, the fans would have complained that the pay-per-view was too short and they didn't get their money's worth.
And if they cut it to 2 hours like the week before the pay-per-view because all of a sudden the thing that they thought was going to happen wasn't going to happen, well, they couldn't do that. They already had the contract with like Viewers' Choice and cable companies across the country to deliver a 3-hour event, contracts that were settled on months and months previous. They had to put out 3 hours of material whether or not they had it.
There are pay-per-views where, man, they struggled to fill that time. Yeah. There's one particularly infamous one, December to Dismember, which is an amazing name, and it's sort of a shame.
Selling really WWE pay-per-view of all time.
Oh, that is a crime.
Yeah.
That is really a shame that they wasted that.
So they never did another one because it had such a mark of shame on it for being so bad.
Oh, they should revive it. It has to just come back and be really good. So are you kind of saying that like wrestling fans overall, they'd rather take a real hit and miss 4-hour pay-per-view than an all-killer, no-filler 2-hour pay-per-view?
No. What I'm saying is that the WWF at the time thought they had more material and some of it dropped out, but they still had to deliver a show of that length to the cable company. At this point, the fans don't have anything to do with it. Now, what the fans got out of this match wasn't all killer. They got the beginnings of an angle that was going to be good for a long time in the Bret and Owen angle. They got to see Shawn Michaels that they hadn't seen in a while, and then they got a bunch of filler, which is not ideal. But that's not nothing. It's, it's a little bit. And if they got bored, and that's the other thing, is that it's an arena show. If the people get bored for a little while, they can get up and they can go get popcorn and a soda and go to the bathroom. Maybe they liked the match previous. Maybe they're going to like the next match. Maybe they're really big Bret Hart fans and they just want to see the Hitman do his thing for a minute. I'm not saying this was great, but I am saying it's not like, oh, we need to cut this and just shorten the show. Logistically, that would have been a huge problem.
I think it is true, though, that wrestling fans want to watch wrestling all the time.
Yeah.
They'd rather it be good.
Right. They'd rather it be good.
But like, I mean, a lot of wrestling fans, and I hate to say it, just don't know about other things a lot of the time, and not just don't know about other things, but don't, even if they know about them, don't care.
I guess that is, that's the thing that I keep bumping up against here, which is that at this point, I have seen enough wrestling that I enjoy, that I have been genuinely thrilled by, to know that there is definitely a percentage of stuff out there that I can 100% get behind and also just kind of think kicks ass. But what really stops me is the time investment asked of wrestling fans compared to how much of the content is actually worth consuming.
And I think as wrestling fans become more critical, as wrestling starts to catch on with people who do like other things, wrestling promoters are going to have to learn that less is more. And it doesn't seem like it's really coming across to them yet. But I mean, there's so much content now. We were watching NWA Power on YouTube, and the fact that it's only an hour long is so fucking refreshing.
Yeah, it was paused, and you'd said, "Oh, I didn't watch this much of the show yet," but yes, you had. It was almost over.
And we've been saying this for many years, Doc and I, when we were
Yeah.
watching Ring of Honor in the 2000s, and this was one of my favorite periods of wrestling ever, where the shit was actually consistently really, really good. The shows were still fucking too long. And what you want is a shorter show that when the fans leave, they want to see more. But what we're getting more and more is just like overkill, to the point where I'm exhausted. And it's funny, doing this podcast, like, before, maybe I'd had some drinks or, something else when I was watching wrestling. And when shit was kind of boring, I could just kind of zone out or talk to whoever I was with or whatever else. Now that we're doing this podcast and I have to like pay attention to the whole match and take notes the whole time, like the boring stuff is starting to get to me a lot worse. And now I feel, and I already kind of had an inkling of this, but I feel really bad for the people who recap wrestling for wrestling websites, who just have to like pay close attention to fucking Raw and SmackDown every single week. No wonder they're so fucking bitter and salty and jaded at this point.
There's a reason we're not doing that. Like, I am a fan of, and maybe at some point we'll be able to like get Evan to start watching a wrestling serial, either current or past. But I don't think we're ever going to like watch a bunch of current product every week and review it, because that level of minutia, I liken the fandom, to bring it back to sports. A baseball fan will watch all the baseball games of their team if they can, and a lot of that is just sitting around waiting for someone to throw the damn ball. And if you have to review that minute by minute, most of it's going to be really boring.
And like wrestling, one of the things I love about wrestling is the community of wrestling fans and talking about it afterwards and stuff like that. And if it weren't for the fact that you watch this shit with your friends, that I watch this shit with my friends, and we can like laugh at when shit is stupid and talk about when we don't like it and talk to each other about other stuff when it's boring. Like, I couldn't imagine sitting by myself and watching this shit week after week.
It's also just, it's generally true in most media that like fans don't actually know what they want. This sounds condescending as fuck.
No, it's
but
true.
It's really not, because it's the reason why, when people like hate when a book series like doesn't resolve everything at the end or something like that. It's like, well, no, because if you did get a perfect resolution to every single thing that would have happened, that is more unsatisfying. Like, you do need to, it's maybe a showbiz cliche to say always leave them wanting more, but it really is true. Like, it is next to impossible to truly conclude something and to truly explore every aspect of a thing so completely, but at like the perfect level, to leave everybody immaculately satisfied by it. Like, almost any great piece of art, any great work is gonna leave you with a feeling of like, oh, I wish I had more of this. I wish I want more. But then now, especially, we're seeing this with just, endless reboots, endless sequels to things, endless, mining of the pop culture of the past for stuff where, people think like, oh, I really want more of this. And you really don't, because the reason that you love the old thing was because there wasn't that much of it. My point as that relates to wrestling specifically is that the fans, I guess a lot of fans want to watch huge chunks of it and are comfortable with a 4-hour pay-per-view that has maybe 90 really awesome minutes in it. But I bet if you started just giving them an hour of really solid, of all killer, no filler shit, people would respond really well to that.
But one of the other things, though, on the note of that, and also about the community of wrestling fans love to complain about wrestling. So, they kind of need the bad shit to, talk shit about.
It's one of the reasons why we want you to see a bunch of this bad wrestling also, is that the fans are just as well... what's the word I'm looking for? They're just as well familiar with the bad stuff because they overanalyze it to death also because it's fun. It's look at this goofy stuff that they did.
And it's not just wrestling, right? I mean... Mystery Science Theater 3000 totally trades on the joy of talking shit about terrible movies.
Well, and I wonder how much of it is that kind of thing, which I'm sure it's a lot of it.
Some of it, yeah.
And then how much of it is I still enjoy a lot of metal. I was maybe more of a metal person when I was younger, but I was never a full 100% true metalhead. I knew a lot of people who were. And I would see them all sort of develop this really, not them all, but I would see a lot of people develop this sort of really toxic relationship with metal where, I went and saw Opeth one time at Terminal 5, and I think it was at Terminal 5. There's a place up top that you can go, a little lounge. Yeah. Show, and I saw a friend of mine there, and I was like, oh man, great show so far. And he was like, no, yeah, I've seen them a bunch of times. And I was like, oh, are you having a good time? And he's like, yeah. I don't know, it just has this, and the way that they, the way that metal fans would talk about bands and just really get into this, develop this really weird resentment towards their favorite bands because just if you and now everything in society is a toxic fandom. This is just my first experience of toxic fandom was in metal.
Right, guys who only listened to Metallica and complained about how much Metallica sucked while they only listened to Metallica.
Yeah, and just a cycle that kept going into their fucking 30s,
and beyond.
And I think you're right, Evan. And I think we can make this a call to fucking wrestling fans. Stop watching wrestling you hate.
There's so much wrestling right now. You're going to like some of it. Between all of the WWE content, which some of it you might really like, and there's Raw and SmackDown and NXT, 205 Live and NXT UK, to the AEW show and their expanding roster of TV shows, to NWA Power. You can subscribe to IndependentWrestling.tv and watch Beyond on Thursdays, their Uncharted Territory show. You can watch Major League Wrestling. They have a show on television every week. Not to mention watching New Japan or All Japan still exists. You can get into Joshi. Stardom is really great. You can watch your local indies, and I'm just scratching the surface.
And, if you really want to spend your energy hating something, hate social injustices.
Yes. Yeah. Anytime you feel a white hot burning rage towards wrestling, direct that white hot burning rage towards closing child internment camps on the border.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
The hate, cancer, hate war. Don't hate, some
the
guys
thing that
who had
you're
a bad
supposed to
match.
love.
Yeah.
Just love the things that you love. And it's also, there's a ton of, I love reading science fiction. There's a ton of awful science fiction out there. So I don't fucking read any of it. I've read one or two of those books kind of by accident because I thought they were good and I was reading them. I was like, oh, they're not good. Just put it down. So
yeah, do you go on all day about that time you read a bad book and tell everybody you know that it's bad and how bad it is for years and years?
So speaking of things that fans have spent a lot of energy hating, this brings us to our other match. So let me tell you a little bit of the story about this Reigns-Bryan match.
From what I could tell from the promo and what they were talking about during the match was that, as far as I could tell, the backstory is that these are two guys who want to fight so they can see who's better at wrestling.
Yeah, you actually, they were giving you none of the real story there.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, you know what? Some might call this uncreative. I appreciate the honesty and simplicity
I
of
mean,
just
if you
like.
wanted the sports analog, if you have two characters that can hold that, that's all the story you need. And arenas around the country will fill for legitimate sports if you can get the two best practitioners of the sport together just to see who will win. That's the whole point. But yeah, that's not the story in the fans' mind, and that's not what anybody was thinking watching this match, because they're not. I mean, Daniel Bryan is.
So here's the real story. So the year before, Daniel Bryan, I mean, we'll tell this story probably in greater depth when we do an episode focusing on Daniel Bryan. But basically, Daniel Bryan was the fan favorite who was kind of, the story is that like he was kind of held down by the company, and eventually he somehow made his way into the main event of the previous WrestleMania and won the title. And the right before that at the Royal Rumble, they didn't even put Bryan in the Royal Rumble. Batista won. It came down to Batista and Roman Reigns at the end. And the crowd really didn't want Batista to win, and they actually would kind of have been happy with Roman Reigns winning at that point.
Roman, at that point in the beginning of 2014, was a rising star. His weaknesses had been covered pretty well, and people, he was a bit of a breath of fresh air. People wanted to try something new.
He was in The Shield, which was a really hot act.
Yeah, a really hot act, and he was the heavy in The Shield, so he was always portrayed as being very effective. And they would have taken him over Batista, who was coming back for like one last run. That in interviews afterwards, Batista himself is like, "Oh, that sucked. I kept telling him the fans are going to hate this." And they're like, "No, Dave, they're going to love you." And he's like, "No, we're going to do this and the fans are going to hate it." And then the fans hated it. And then Batista left again because he doesn't want to do wrestling that's bad.
So they ended up giving the fans what they wanted, and Bryan won the title at WrestleMania.
Oh, wait, hold on. Go back there for a second. Batista won the Royal Rumble to the massive boos of the crowd. Yeah.
I just need a little background on, because as far as I could tell, Daniel Bryan's deal is that he's very positive and wears awesome boots. Yes. I would imagine there was more to his character than that.
I mean, his character is kind of that he's kind of like Bret Hart in that he's just the best wrestler. And also sort of politically progressive.
Well, he's a vegan. He's not a full, he said in interviews, he's not a full vegan anymore because it caused him a few health problems. So now he's like a vegan and he eats a little fish or something. Look it up if you care.
He's really into like DIY sustainable living. Yeah. He has a compost toilet to the chagrin of his wife.
He's a Northwest hippie,
They say he's from Aberdeen, Washington. Like he
Kurt Cobain.
And he looks a lot like, I know a few people who are sort of in the I guess in the survivalist community. It's overwhelmingly, I guess, what we would think of as more politically conservative, but you do get a slice of some folks that are definitely way more on like the hippie, like lefty side of survivalism.
Like our dear friend Hart.
And then like Hart,
shout out to Hart.
Like our friend Ash up in Vermont, teaching other people survival skills and stuff.
That's cool.
And so I got that vibe from Daniel Bryan, and he seems. I mean, that was the thing I loved. I felt like a he just seems like a guy. He has this vibe where you feel like you could have been friends with him.
People genuinely like him, and he's the best wrestler. And the WWE took a long time to come around to that.
And his passion for wrestling really comes through.
And he seems like a little they make a big deal out of it in this match, but he seems like he's a little on the small side compared to other wrestlers and that kind of thing. And that definitely works in his favor. And also just great facial expressions. Man, there's one moment in this where there's like there's a reversal. I don't know. He's trying to suplex Reigns off of the turnbuckle. And then Reigns reverses that or something. There's just a moment of just pure shock and surprise on Bryan's face that I found very delightful.
So Bryan wins the title at WrestleMania 30, and then unfortunately suffers a weird shoulder neck injury that forces him to abdicate the title very shortly afterwards. And he's out for 8 months. Just before the Royal Rumble 2015, they announce that he's returning and that he's going to be in the Royal Rumble this time. So everyone wants him to win the Royal Rumble, go to WrestleMania, and reclaim the title that he never lost.
Oh, people were really hot about that. You know, the yes movement and the yes chants all for him.
That's a great, by the way, that's just, I know, every wrestler tries to have a couple of motions that are associated with them and a crowd chant. This is fucking great. Yeah. Just pointing your fingers up. Yes.
He turned heel
amazing.
for a while and started shouting no, and it was super entertaining. Super entertaining.
Oh, Bryan as a heel is a whole other thing.
He had a shirt that just said no, 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 and on the back it says stop that. It's just great.
Because he wanted them to stop chanting yes.
Right. The crowd would still chant yes at him. He'd just be like, no, no, no.
And he had an incredibly entertaining team with Kane called Team Hell No. One of my favorite tag teams of all time.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
they
fantastic.
got over. A quick aside about Team Hell No, like they were doing a thing for a while on Raw. They were doing like interactive polls where it's like, what kind of match do you want this to be? Vote on Facebook or something, or dial in, text this, and after the commercial break, we'll do what you say. And usually it was like a really loaded thing where everybody knew what it would be, or something where it was real but there was no consequence to it. And they had Kane and Daniel Bryan on opposite sides, and it's like, what do you want them to do? And it was like, do you want them to have like a hardcore match, or do you want them to have a regular match, or do you want them to hug it out? And the WWE presumed that their audience would be like hardcore match, and they were like hug it out. And apparently it's like they're coming back for commercial, and they're like hugging is winning, and they're like, really? And they're like, yeah, you got 7 minutes to fill. Go. And they went out and they drew it out for so long, but their timing was so perfect that they finally hugged. The place went insane, and they tagged for months, and they won the tag titles, and it was just brilliant. Absolutely
That
brilliant.
sounds great.
Yeah.
I would love to watch that.
Yeah.
They actually just did a little special on it on the WWE Network that you should watch. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So anyway, Royal Rumble happens. Daniel Bryan is in the Royal Rumble. Everyone wants him to win. They just get him. He just gets dumped early. Bray Wyatt throws him out
Like 20 minutes
nothing.
in.
And the crowd is pissed.
They're pissed the rest of the match. They don't accept anything else that happens. The rest of the story, they boo everybody coming out. They keep chanting Daniel Bryan the whole time. They are so angry.
Especially Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns gets the brunt of it. This was the one where they had him carted out halfway through,
Right.
and then he came back.
But
they didn't even cart him out. He just kind of limps to the back, and he looks like he's fine, really. And it's like,
Yeah.
why the fuck is he going to the back? And then he comes back, and he wins the fucking Royal Rumble to massive, massive boos. But they had already decided that Roman Reigns was going to be the guy. He was going to be the guy to carry the company for the next decade or whatever. So they didn't give a fuck that the crowd hated this.
That baffles me
Yeah.
more than almost anything else I have come across in wrestling, because, I mean, Roman Reigns really just, for all of the positive things I just said about Daniel Bryan, like, this match was a real big wet sack of who cares.
Right?
Like Roman Reigns is just everything about him, aside from the fact, like, if I saw a picture of him, I'd be like, there is an attractive buff dude with, and you know what? I normally hate those style of tattoos, but the fact that he is actually Samoan, that's all cool. He does not have a meaningful character. The charisma isn't really there. This whole match, they're like pitching him as like, oh, he's like so much stronger, which, I mean, yeah, he's like, looks like he's physically larger than Daniel Bryan, but like, he doesn't read to me as like a powerhouse, hulking anything. And I'm gonna fucking say it again. I will always say the jump punch, which I will not use the idiotic name that he uses for his finishing move. It's a jump punch. That's what it is. I just think of Ryu in Street Fighter 2, where he would like jump and like kind of ball his body up, and then you do the jab, and the jab just kind of, it's like this little like.
Oh, and in real life, by the way, if you're jumping and punching, if you know anything about like like the physiology of punching, you're not using your legs to kind of push through the ground or anything. You're just hitting somebody with your hand.
It's the kind of thing that, like, it's like little kid logic. Like a jump kick is cool,
Yeah,
so
that's
why
different.
not a jump punch?
And it just doesn't look cool.
Yeah.
It all of his moves look bad.
He throws one good clothesline.
Even Fire Ant's Superman punch looks better than Reigns.
Well, Fire Ant is a good wrestler. Has good matches with
So
people.
so the crowd hates Reigns winning the Rumble, but they decide, oh well, maybe if we have Bryan fight Reigns at the pay-per-view in between the Rumble and WrestleMania, and Reigns beats Bryan, and then Bryan shakes his hand, then maybe the Bryan fans will be like, oh, okay, we like Reigns.
He's got our guy's endorsement, but it was so ham-fisted and forced, like it just doesn't work like that.
Also, he should call it the ham fist.
Yes, that would be good.
Bryan tried everything he possibly could in this match to make Roman look good, and you got what you got.
You know, you talk about Daniel Bryan being a great wrestler. I got to see more of his matches. Obviously, I got to try to get a better idea of technically what he can do. But I can definitely tell that he has the skill that is incredibly important to any improvised art form, whether you're, doing improv comedy, whether you're playing jazz, where you're making the other person look good.
Yeah.
Where you're there, and which is so much harder than looking good yourself.
Oh, so much.
And it's unfortunate in wrestling because a lot of the time the guys who are really good at making other guys look good never get their own shine because they're always used to put someone else over.
Talking about the fans don't always know what they want, that's just the thing that, like, nobody who's outside of the business or nobody who doesn't have a background in that kind of stuff is going to be able to tell that. Like, right, if you see a match and you are somebody who's just a fan of wrestling, who's not necessarily a huge nerd about it or hasn't learned anything about performance arts or anything like that, you're going to look at that and you're not going to pick up on the fact that one guy is making the other guy look really good.
Especially if you're a kid. If you're a kid, you should be like, oh, this guy's stronger.
Yeah,
that's the guy I like, is the strong guy.
Daniel Bryan uniquely can make anybody he's in the ring with look better, and to his benefit as well, because then if he wins, he looks better than a guy who's better, and if he loses, then somebody who's awesome beat him, and there's no shame in that. Recently he had a match that he had been working on in his head for years. He'd been saying, I want to have a match with Brock Lesnar, and people thought like he couldn't do it, there's too much of a size difference, etc. And he's like, no, I think I know the story that I would tell with Brock Lesnar. The story is fantastic because first, just the overarching story of it, and I would like to show you this match one day, Evan, he gets the fans to believe, and kind of in the meta, that the WWE is just having Lesnar murder him, and then the hope starts. And by the end of the match, you really, you don't know how it's going to go. And it's all Daniel Bryan, because then Lesnar's way more competent, by the way, than Roman Reigns. I know we've seen some stinky Lesnar matches, but Lesnar is an anomaly. He's very unique. When he has good matches, they're different from everyone else's.
And the sad thing is that's the match we would have gotten at WrestleMania if Daniel Bryan had won the Royal Rumble. He would have wrestled Brock Lesnar.
And instead, we got Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, and Brock won, right?
No. So the crowd hated it so much, hated Reigns so much, they wouldn't have accepted Reigns winning. They didn't want Brock to win. So that's when they had Seth Rollins cash in the Money in the Bank.
That was
Seth Rollins ended up winning. That was the only. Yeah,
I actually
they
really liked that, because I remember that match. That wasn't the year that he just lost. That was the year where.
That's how much we hated Roman Reigns. Is that. Seth Rollins, who I have never liked at all in any capacity, I was so happy to see. I was there live for that one in California. Yeah. I was so happy to see Rollins and to see him win that match.
The Money in the Bank briefcase, they have a match where somebody wins a title match whenever they want. And often people will cash it in right after a grueling match that the champion was had. Seth Rollins decided to cash it in during the main event of WrestleMania. Inserted himself in the match, won the title, and got the hell out of there with the belt. It was actually really good.
But in ensuing years, and you saw one of these main events against The Undertaker, Evan, that time they were like, oh, the crowd is going to hate it. We got to put the belt on Rollins. But in the next 3 years, they still put Reigns in the main event and had him win 2 massive boos from the crowd. Year after year.
So that's at this point in time, Reigns is still not actually popular with anybody. Like, Reigns is popular in the sense that, like, he's popular with management.
No,
Wait, you
he's
mean
popular.
now?
Here's the thing: is Reigns isn't popular with the vocal fans who go to the shows. He still sells a ton of merch and is still super popular with, I guess, kids and maybe some women and like large. And I don't know, a constituency of the WWE audience that you don't really hear at the shows. Though if you watch this match with Bryan, the crowd is kind of split. And some of the people in the audience are happy about it at the end. They're split in the sense that some are cheering for Bryan and some are cheering for Reigns. No one is booing Bryan.
Yeah,
Lots of people are booing Reigns.
Reigns. Yeah. Reigns is unpopular in the way that the people who don't like him will let you know it. The people who like Reigns don't see the point in booing other good guys that they don't like. And there's a positive appeal to be said about that. These days, like today, Reigns doesn't get booed nearly as much. First of all, they're not just pointlessly booking him on top anymore. They finally stopped, and maybe he can have another organic rise. The other thing, and this is significant, is that several months ago he came out on Raw to a huge chorus of boos, and he's like, "Oh, hey, everybody," and they're like, "Boo," and he's like, "So, my name's not really Roman Reigns. I'm a guy named Joe, and I have leukemia, and it came back, and I'm gonna beat it again like I did when I was a kid," and everyone's like, "Oh, well, good luck." And a few months later, he was like, "It's in remission. I'm good." And he came back, and everyone, like, even if we're still not huge fans of him, we appreciate. How can you boo a guy like that? And he's always like, he's come back twice, always hanging over his head. It might come back again. Damn.
And the thing about it is, like, they've tried so hard to get him over with the crowd that there's part of us that was like, is this a work?
I'm sure. Well, because then there's also the problem that, like, I mean, yeah, how can you not respect that, right? Like,
Right,
that's
exactly,
an amazing thing.
you
Of
know.
course, it comes back. But then after a while, you're just like, oh, man, like, I feel really bad about the fact that I still really don't like this guy who had an incredibly inspiring story and did an objectively, lived through an incredibly difficult thing and made it through to the other side.
And everyone that goes through the WWE really likes him personally, and apparently he's very, like, he's a locker room leader, and he works very hard, and all of that good stuff.
I could see that. I could
Yeah.
see him if he's just like such a great warm dude.
Yeah.
Behind
He's
the
a single
scenes.
dad, right?
I don't think he's a single.
He's not a
dad.
single dad, but they show him like with his daughter all the time.
Yeah, he's a good
I feel
dad.
if
and-
you're a single dad, you should not be wrestling.
well, he would make enough money to hire one
Yeah.
of the people that takes care of your kids for you, as Vince McMahon would probably suggest him to do.
That's got to be part of the blind spot that management maybe has with him, which is that he must just be like a really great dude that nobody's like wants to say anything bad about, or nobody like wants to like pull him aside and be like, the fucking jump punch looks really dumb, and that really shouldn't be how you finish.
A couple of things about why Daniel Bryan is so awesome in this match. So they talk about him kicking Roman Reigns in the liver a bunch. And one of the really annoying things about Roman Reigns is he wears this body armor. And it's like, he's a baby face. Why should we feel any sympathy for him when he's taking these moves, when he's wearing body armor? But Bryan found a way to kind of get under it with his kicks and also just kick him really hard. So it actually does look like he's doing damage.
He kicks him. There's a one point towards the end where he kicks him in the head in a way that I'm like, that is you can't fake that, especially the sound. It made a sound that I'm like, that's hard to. I mean, maybe you can fake it. I don't know.
Well, I've been kicked in the head pretty. It's really weird to say this, but I've been kicked in the head really, really hard in ways where you can only think that's actually quite safe. It hurts for a minute, but it's not. I'm not going to get concussed by this. I'm not going to get busted open, and
Yeah, I guess like I mean,
I've also just been kicked in the head by people who don't know what the hell they're doing, and I've called them out on it, they weren't happy that I called them out on it. But screw you! Don't take advantage of people in the ring.
Is it like the chest slap, sort of, where like if you do it in a very specific way, it makes a big sound, but it doesn't actually like rattle your brain around in your head?
Also, if you like go with it and know how to take it properly, like you gotta be like water in the ring. You gotta flow with everything. If you're rigid, you shatter. If if you flow, you're good.
And I think also the point isn't for it not to hurt,
Right.
If you got to be a tough guy. You got to be able to.
Yeah.
It's got to hurt. It's got to not injure you.
There's a big
That's what's
difference
important.
between that. There's a big difference between
Ah.
getting up in the morning with bruises and being unable to stand in the morning because somebody broke your leg.
I don't think I had been really thinking about that differentiation until now.
There's a huge difference between those two. If you don't want anything to hurt, maybe don't be a pro wrestler,
Sure. Well, yeah.
But then again, it's like I know people I know that have just worked in offices their whole lives and their backs are messed up and their knees are messed up and they get out of breath after walking a couple of blocks. And it's like, I've had ACL surgery. I've had pile of injuries myself, but I'm in reasonably good shape and I know how to move and my back is okay most of the time.
I
And,
guess.
yeah.
I guess the way I had been thinking about it was just sort of there's this spectrum from like no pain to pain, and then once the pain increases to a certain point, well, you must be getting injured now instead.
Yeah.
But I guess it really is more complicated than that.
It is. Well, not to be horribly morbid, but the whole point of legitimate torture is that you're not injuring the person you're torturing so that you can continue to cause them pain indefinitely.
That is true. I read Vince's book about that.
Yes.
That I had to find on the on the dark web.
Or Stu Harts.
Stu Hart's book.
Yeah, that's far more appropriate.
Dungeon. Come
yeah.
here, kid. You're going to sleep.
Vince writes fan fiction for Stu Hart's books about
Yeah.
how to torture people.
One last awesome thing that Bryan does is the reversal of the spear into the small package.
Yeah, just
That was
nabbing
freaking
him in
cool.
midair. In Ring of Honor, they used to call him Mr. Small Package.
He gets that in as often as he possibly can.
Did you catch in this match he gave the ref and I've got till 5?
I missed it
He
this
did.
time.
He did.
Can I, obviously we've discussed how management seems to not understand like what to do with Roman Reigns or anything. Why isn't he a heel? Because it seems like he could be almost the same guy, and if it was just
Yeah.
presented villainously, maybe
The night after WrestleMania when he beat The Undertaker, he came out to universal hatred. And he acted like a heel. And it was great. And it was
He
like,
didn't say a word for a while.
why don't they just go this direction? And they just didn't. And I mean, I think there's the only reason for it is I think they need a top babyface, and they didn't think they had anyone else at the time who could fill that role. And he sells a lot of merchandise and stuff like that. Yeah, they just didn't, because they didn't see a guy like, Bryan was hurt again at that point, right?
Bryan was forced into retirement for a while with brain injuries, and he had to go to a large series of doctors and go through a large series of therapy that took several images of his brain to prove to the WWE that he had healed to the point where he could wrestle, and they weren't going to let him. And finally, he got like enough doctors and experts to say, no, you're good to go. And besides, once his contract ran out, he was going to leave and wrestle somewhere else anyway, that they let him start wrestling again several months ago.
The only really other option they had was Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
And now they've gone with Seth Rollins, and he's somehow worse.
I see people in Seth Rollins t-shirts, I might add, though, just on the streets in New York.
That's true, yeah. But that was years ago. When he was a heel, he was way more interesting.
Rollins? Oh, yeah, definitely.
Since he's become the guy.
Right now, he's such a weenie. He comes on TV,
Awful.
he puts over the company and how happy he is to be there, and then he's scared of the bad guys.
And then he's Becky Lynch's boyfriend, who by far does not deserve to be her boyfriend.
This might be a weird question,
Yeah.
but is it more important for a face to be a good wrestler than for a heel? Like, can a heel do their job and not be as like skilled of a wrestler and get it across, whereas a face, at least to me,
I think it's more important for a heel to be a good wrestler.
Yeah.
Because a babyface doesn't have to do all that much. They just have to like appeal to the crowd's sense of either justice or something in themselves. And
Or
the
just
heel,
beat up the hated heel.
Or just beat up the hated heel. Whereas it's up to the heel to make sure that the crowd doesn't like them enough and likes the babyface enough enough that they can get actually invested in wanting the babyface to win.
And is it true that the heel is generally the one leading the match, like calling the match on the ring?
That's it. That's not necessarily what happens. I think it happens a little less these days, but traditionally, that's if you're calling a match in the ring, the heel will be calling the match. They'll set the pace for a lot of reasons. I mean, some of it's a lot easier to call spots when you're administering a headlock than when you're in a headlock. But a lot of the times the structure of the match is that the babyface will sell while the heel is on offense. So it's up to the heel to keep the pace right and to make sure the psychology is on point and tell the babyface, okay, take a hope spot now. And then the babyface does a couple of moves and the heel cuts them back off when the heel is ready to cut them back off. So, yeah.
And think about the dynamic with the crowd here, right? The heel has the babyface in a hold. They're doing their heel stuff. They're waiting for the crowd to start getting behind the babyface. So a lot of the stuff that you think is like boring and they're waiting for the crowd to respond, and they're not going to move. They're not going to let the babyface get their comeback until the crowd has gotten behind the babyface.
Yeah, if they jump the gun and just go into the next set of moves before the crowd wants it, the crowd doesn't even really want it. They don't really care. They need the crowd to care. They need the crowd to be getting uncomfortable that it hasn't happened yet so that it feels good when it does happen.
Interesting. I don't have anything to say to that. That's just really
that
interesting.
All feeds into what you were saying, which is absolutely true, which is crowds, audiences don't really know exactly what they want, or they wouldn't articulate it in a way that you could deliver what it is that they want.
You couldn't ask them, hey, what do you want? And they'll articulate something that if you then went and did that would be exactly what they wanted. Like it's a much more primal, visceral kind of thing that is hard to enunciate.
If you ask a child what they want to eat, they want ice cream. But if you cook them, a nice chicken dinner that's spiced nicely, they'll enjoy it, and then maybe you give them some ice cream. But if you just give them ice cream, they'll be hungry and hyper, and then they'll start crying.
On the other hand, there's only so long you can keep the ice cream away from them before they completely rebel.
Fucking came here for ice cream, guys. Yeah. What are we doing?
It's like, no, just liver, raw, every night.
Do we have any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
There was a sign that said, punch that hippie. I think it was directed toward Daniel Bryan.
Definitely. Oh, man. Did they have for a few years.
And another sign. Wait, go ahead.
I was gonna go into total Bellas, and now for a while, the Bella twins were dating respectively Daniel Bryan and John Cena, and one of them ended up marrying Daniel Bryan, and they have a kid, and they're adorable, and they live in their little compound in Oregon or something, composting and so on. And the other one, John Cena, broke up.
Their French bulldog Josie died.
I heard about that. That's sad.
Oh
yeah.
French bulldogs don't live very long generally. They're abominations. They're adorable, wonderful, abominate, but we shouldn't have bred them.
They're like pugs, where they're born and then their lives are naught but suffering, and but they're adorable, so we keep cranking them out.
So Daniel Bryan apprehended a burglar trying to flee from his house once, and he said he was mostly just worried about his dog. And he saw the guy running away from his house, and he ran, pursued him, grabbed him, threw him to the ground, and put him in a hold to hold him there. And the guy is lucky that it was Daniel Bryan, the least malicious guy that could kill you on the planet. And he just held you there. It's like, I'm just holding you there until the cops come. No, I'm actually a world-class wrestler. You picked the wrong house, buddy. Sorry.
If that had been Stu Hart, oh, man.
They would have been buried in the dungeon.
He would have been begging to die.
Yes, before the cops showed up.
One last sign. This was a Bryan sign that said, all about that Bryan, no Roman.
We're gonna have to delve into Daniel Bryan, who I feel like I'm going to wind up wishing he had been my older brother or something like that. That's kind of the vibe I get from him. But yeah, this is the premium episode. So
Evan.
Oh, yeah.
He was originally trained by Shawn Michaels.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
He
okay.
broke in. He went to Shawn Michaels' wrestling school when he ran a wrestling school for
I
a
really
little
thought you were
while
gonna
while
say
he was out.
I really thought you were going to say he
injury.
broke into Shawn Michaels'
No,
house.
no.
And forced him to train him to wrestle.
And like then he trained under a few other people, but primarily he trained under Shawn Michaels. He's very much a Shawn Michaels protege. The fact that they never really had a match is like it just never happened. Shawn retired and everything. But I figured I wanted you to hear that before we close.
Absolutely. I'm so much more. All right, so we'll have to get ready for a Daniel Bryan episode within the next few episodes.
Or 3.
Yeah.
we could go on about
sounds
D-Bry.
good. But yeah, this is the premium episode, so we're not gonna plug any of our crap at the end of this because you probably already know about it. So we'll save you, and you're paying $5, so you don't have to hear that at the end of every episode.
Thank you very much for contributing your money to us. We hope to continue to provide this level of content and more. The more people hop on board, so tell your friends.
Yep. And please also, give us feedback. Let us know how you feel. We're gonna start trying to do things like give you timestamps. And we're going to try to start covering more stuff that you can just find on the internet so you don't have to give the WWE any money. And
the only reason we're still giving the WWE money is to do this podcast.
Yeah. Please send us messages. And then if you're a patron, if you are Patreonizing us, if you're a Patreon supporter, then we will actually listen to you. Whereas we don't do that as much to the other people on Twitter, but don't tell them that.
Give us all your feedback. We want to hear it.
Alrighty. This has been Contesting Wrestling. Thank you very much.